Interesting. When I was saving this company for free, I was a support staff. You were proud of me only after you needed me.
The first time my family said they were proud of me, the bank manager was already shaking my hand. He wasn't congratulating them, he was congratulating me. And the building he was standing in front of, the same building my father once said would belong to my brother because some children are born to lead and some are born to help, was no longer theirs to protect. It was mine to buy. I still remember the exact look on my mother's face that morning. It wasn't love, it wasn't regret, it wasn't even shock, not really. It was something colder than that. It was the expression of a woman realizing that the child she treated like spare furniture had somehow become the only person in the room with real power. My name is Nora Bennett. I'm 29 years old, and for most of my life, my family treated me like the least important person in every photograph, every holiday, every plan, every conversation about the future. I wasn't the oldest. That was my brother Cole, the golden son with the charming smile and a talent for making weak ideas sound bold. I wasn't the youngest. That was my sister Ava, the pretty one who cried beautifully and somehow turned every room into a stage built for her feelings. I was the middle child, the useful one, the reliable one, the one people called mature when what they really meant was, you don't get to need anything because everyone expects you to understand. By the time I was 12, I knew how my family worked. My father owned a building supply company in our town in western Missouri. Bennett Supply had been in the family for 30 years, and my father spoke about it the way other men talked about legacy, honor, and bloodlines. He loved to say that one day Cole would take it over and expand it. He said it in front of customers, in front of church friends, in front of relatives, in front of me. Cole has the instinct, he'd say. He knows how to deal with people. What he meant was that Cole knew how to talk loudly and confidently, even when he had no idea what he was doing. I was the one who actually understood numbers. I was the one who could spot errors in invoices, catch missing decimals, and explain why cash flow mattered more than appearances. But none of that was considered special in my family, because I wasn't doing it with swagger. I was just quietly preventing disasters no one bothered to notice. My mother, Denise, had a phrase she used whenever I looked hurt. Not every blessing arrives wrapped the same way. At the time, I thought she was trying to comfort me. Later, I understood she was training me to accept crumbs and call them grace. Ava got dance lessons, spray tans for pageants, and a room painted blush pink because she said white walls made her feel emotionally unsupported. Cole got a truck at 17 because my father said a future businessman needed the right image. I got a used laptop for school and a speech about responsibility. I told myself that was fine. I was practical. I didn't need much. That's what happens when a child gets ignored long enough. She starts trying to be easy to love. In high school, I got the grades nobody celebrated for more than a few minutes. Straight A's, academic awards, a regional scholarship, the kind of achievements teachers mention in newsletters and guidance counselors use as examples for other students. My father would nod, say, "Good job," then go right back to talking about Cole's leadership energy, even when that energy mostly went into half-finished plans and expensive mistakes. When I was 18, I got accepted into a business program at the University of Illinois with partial scholarship money. It was the biggest door that had ever opened for me. I remember standing in the kitchen with the letter shaking in my hands, hoping, just once, that my family would look at me like I was the miracle of the day. My mother hugged me. My father smiled. Cole said, "Nice." Then that same evening, while I was still trying to let happiness settle into my bones, I overheard my parents in the den. "We can move her share into the expansion account," my father said. My mother lowered her voice. "Are you sure?" "She got scholarship money. Cole needs more support right now. This is business. She'll understand. I stood in the hallway with the acceptance packet pressed against my chest so tightly it bent. They were talking about the college fund. The fund my grandmother had helped start when each of us was born. The one I'd been told was set aside for my education. The one I had carefully never counted on too much, because somewhere inside me, I already knew counting on my family was dangerous. They used most of my portion to help Cole open a premium showroom addition to the business, a flashy idea he pitched with glossy sketches and zero discipline. He wanted modern signage, polished concrete floors, imported display units, and a branded customer lounge so local contractors could experience the future of supply. I got student loans and a part-time campus job. He got an office with his name on the glass. Nobody asked me if that felt fair. My mother called me into the kitchen before I left for college and placed both hands around a mug like she was preparing to deliver wisdom instead of betrayal. "You're the strong one," she said. "Strong girls build from whatever they're given." I wanted to ask her why strength in our house always meant swallowing disappointment quietly so someone else could shine. Instead, I nodded, because that's what invisible daughters do. They make other people comfortable with their own neglect. College changed me, but not in the glamorous movie way people talk about. It didn't turn me into someone fearless overnight. It turned me into someone tired and sharp and disciplined. I worked in the library circulation desk, tutored freshmen in accounting, skipped spring break trips, and learned what it felt like to calculate every grocery item before putting it in the cart. Meanwhile, back home, Cole's showroom underperformed almost immediately. The polished floors didn't matter because he couldn't manage ordering cycles, vendor relationships, or expense control. He thought enthusiasm could replace skill. He thought being named the future owner was the same thing as becoming capable. Whenever there was a problem, my father called me, not to ask how I was doing, not to check if exams were going well, not to say he missed me. He called because the payroll numbers weren't matching, or because Cole didn't understand the monthly reconciliation, or because Ava had accidentally used the business card for personal branding necessities, which turned out to mean salon visits, boutique shopping, and a weekend influencer event 2 states away. So while I was earning my degree, I was also remotely fixing pieces of the business I wasn't considered important enough to inherit. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself one day my family would see me clearly. I told myself if I just kept being responsible, the truth would eventually become undeniable. That was my mistake. Families built on favoritism do not reward the child who absorbs the damage. They depend on her. When I graduated, I had 2 job offers, one in Chicago, one in Dallas. Both entry-level, both modest, both real chances to build a life that belonged to me. I was ready to leave. Then my father sat me down in his office and said he needed me to come home for 6 months. "Just until things stabilize," he said. "You understand the books better than anyone. Cole needs support. The company needs family right now." I asked whether I would have a formal role. He laughed. "You always make things so official." My mother touched my arm and said, "This is your family's business, Nora. Don't act like helping us is some burden." So I stayed. 6 months turned into 11. I worked 6 days a week, often 7. I cleaned up vendor disputes, reorganized inventory systems, renegotiated bad terms, and corrected financial reporting that should have embarrassed every adult in that office. I arrived before the warehouse opened and stayed after the front showroom lights were shut off. I wasn't paid what I was worth. I wasn't given a title that matched the work, but I saved that company more than once. And every time something improved, my father praised Cole in front of staff. "That's leadership," he'd say, clapping him on the shoulder. Cole would smile like he had actually done something beyond wearing expensive boots and talking over people. One afternoon, after I had spent 3 straight days preparing financials for a crucial line of credit renewal, the banker came in for a meeting. He asked who had restructured the reporting system because it was the cleanest version he'd seen from us in years. My father smiled and said, "We've all been working hard." We all. That was when something in me started to harden into truth. Not loud truth, not dramatic truth, just the kind that settles in the body and changes the way you stand. A few weeks later, I overheard Cole telling one of his friends that I was good with paperwork, but not really built for the bigger picture side of business. The bigger picture side. As if numbers weren't the difference between survival and collapse. As if keeping the doors open was less impressive than pretending you were the reason they opened at all. I started applying for jobs again in secret, late at night, quietly, carefully, the way some people plan escapes. Then came the dinner that finally broke whatever hope I still had. It was my mother's birthday, and she had invited a few family friends over. The conversation turned, as it often did, to the future of Bennett's Supply. One of the guests asked whether I was staying with the company long-term, since I clearly knew the financial side so well. Before I could answer, my father chuckled and said, "Nora's always been better as support staff. Cole's the one with the vision." The table laughed lightly, not cruelly, not loudly, just enough to let the sentence settle into the room like it belonged there. Support staff. That's how my father described me after everything I had done. I went upstairs that night and cried without making a sound, because in that house, even grief felt like something I had to keep tidy. A week later, my father and Cole asked me to co-sign a larger loan. Cole wanted another expansion, new equipment, a digital remodel, more debt wrapped in the language of confidence. The company's books had improved because of my work, but not enough to justify the kind of risk they wanted. The bank needed stronger financial backing, and because I had perfect credit, stable job prospects, and no reckless history, my name suddenly mattered. Not my effort, not my intelligence, my signature. That night, my mother stood in the kitchen with that same soft, persuasive voice she always used when she had already decided what I should sacrifice. "You know this family built everything for all of you," she said. I looked at her and almost laughed. "No," I wanted to say. "This family built everything for the people you chose. I just kept the walls from falling." When I refused to co-sign, the room turned cold. Cole said I was jealous. My father said I was short-sighted. My mother said the sentence that finally killed the obedient daughter in me. If you can't show up when your family needs you, don't expect this family to keep showing up for you. It was a threat, not a warning, a threat. And in that moment, I understood something I should have understood years earlier. In my family, love had always been conditional on usefulness. So I packed. I accepted the job in Chicago. I left before sunrise 2 days later with a used sedan, 3 boxes, a suitcase, and every important document I owned. My mother didn't come outside. My father sent one text that said, "Do what you think is best." Cole didn't message at all. For the first 4 hours of that drive, I cried so hard I had to stop twice. Not because I was unsure, because it hurts to finally accept that the people who raised you were never protecting you the way you protected them in your imagination. Chicago was not easy, but it was honest. My first apartment was tiny and drafty and had radiators that hissed like irritated ghosts all winter. My first job was as a junior financial analyst at a logistics firm where nobody cared whose daughter I was. They cared whether I was good. And I was. I was good because I had spent years solving problems no one thanked me for. I was good because I knew how money lies when people want it to. I was good because family dysfunction is, in its own terrible way, a masterclass in reading what everyone else avoids saying out loud. I worked harder than anyone expected. I learned faster than people twice my age assumed I could. I stayed late, asked better questions, caught reporting errors before senior managers did, and earned the kind of trust that doesn't arrive through charm, but through consistency. For the first time in my life, doing excellent work actually changed my life. My salary increased, then my title, then my confidence. I built an emergency fund, then I paid down my loans. Then I started investing. Then I moved into a better apartment with windows that actually let in light instead of just reminding you the outside world existed somewhere beyond the brick. And slowly, something I had never allowed myself to imagine began to happen. Peace. Not flashy happiness, not revenge, just peace. The kind that comes when nobody in your home is measuring your worth against someone else's applause. Before I tell you what happened when my family suddenly remembered I existed, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And if you like this story, subscribe my channel for more beautiful stories. At 26, I was promoted to Senior Strategy Manager. At 27, I left corporate and joined a supply chain software startup as head of finance and operations. It was a terrifying move on paper and the smartest decision of my life. The founder, Lena Torres, was the first boss I ever had who looked at my work and said, "You don't belong behind somebody else's ego. You build systems people rely on." That sentence hit me harder than she knew. For most of my life, I had been positioned behind somebody else's ego. Cole's, my father's, even my mother's idea of what a daughter should be. At the startup, I helped fix pricing models, streamline vendor forecasting, and prepare the company for a funding round that most people privately thought we wouldn't survive. We survived. Then we grew. Then we became profitable faster than anyone expected. 3 years after I arrived, we were featured in an industry publication. 6 months later, I sold equity that changed my life permanently. Not billionaire money, not fantasy money, just real, serious, adulthood-altering money, the kind that buys freedom instead of appearances. I bought a condo. I hired a financial planner. I funded a scholarship at my old high school for girls going into business or finance. I started sleeping better than I had in years. And in that same season of my life, I met Daniel. He was an architect, steady and thoughtful, with the kind of face that looked like patience had shaped it. He didn't ask intrusive questions when I told him my family and I weren't close. He just said, "You don't owe anyone the version of you they were careless with." I loved him a little for that before I was ready to admit it. We moved slowly, maturely, without games, without chaos. He met the version of me I had built, not the version my family had assigned me. That matters more than people think. While my life was quietly becoming beautiful, I heard almost nothing from home. An occasional holiday text from my mother with the emotional warmth of a bank reminder. A birthday message from Ava with too many exclamation points and no actual intimacy. Once, a late-night missed call from my father that was never followed up. Silence can hurt, but it can also heal if it gives you room to stop performing for people who never intended to clap for you. Then the cracks started showing. I didn't hear the full story all at once. Families rarely collapse in one dramatic scene. They leak. They unravel through church gossip, old classmates, mutual acquaintances, and social media posts that say too much by trying to say nothing. Cole's leadership had matured exactly as much as I expected it would, which is to say, not at all. He had taken on too much debt chasing growth he didn't know how to sustain. He over-ordered inventory during a market swing, misread customer demand, ignored advice from experienced staff, and started making flashy hires because he liked looking successful more than becoming stable. Ava, meanwhile, launched an online lifestyle boutique that looked elegant on Instagram and bled money in real life. My mother supported it because she adored anything that made people say Ava had taste. Small transfers became bigger ones, personal expenses mixed with business expenses. The family accounts became a maze of denial. My father, stubborn as ever, refused to admit the company was vulnerable until vendors started tightening terms and one of the regional banks declined a renewal. Then came the part nobody in my hometown could ignore. My father had a mild stroke. He survived, but recovery was slow, stressful, and expensive. Medical bills arrived. Insurance covered some things and not enough of others. Suddenly, the family that had spent years acting like money was a tool for maintaining status had to face what money actually is when life becomes real. It is oxygen. It is time. It is choices. And they had wasted so many of theirs trying to keep Cole looking like a future king. My mother started calling distant relatives under the language of prayer requests and concern. But tucked inside every worried conversation was the same hidden message. Maybe someone should help. No one had enough to save them. At least, not anyone in their world. Then one of my father's old business friends saw an article about our company's expansion and my role in it. He sent it around. Someone forwarded it to someone else. My LinkedIn was no longer private. My title was public. My success became local gossip before it became family concern. That was the first time my mother called me twice in 1 week. I stared at the screen and felt my stomach tighten, the way old wounds do when they recognize the hand reaching toward them. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Her voice sounded softer than I remembered, but not softer in the places that mattered. "Nora," she said, "your father's health has been difficult, and we really need to talk as a family. Please call me back. This isn't the time for old misunderstandings." Old misunderstandings. As if years of favoritism were a scheduling issue. As if turning me into unpaid labor, emotional spare parts, and emergency credit wasn't a pattern. As if the child they treated like support staff had merely misread the family dynamic. I called back the next evening from my office, not from home. I wanted walls around me that belonged to my present, not memories. My mother answered on the first ring. For 3 minutes, she gave me the polished version. My father's recovery, stress, the pressure on the company, how hard it had all been, how Ava was trying her best, how Cole had so much on his shoulders, how family had to lean on each other in difficult seasons. Then she got to the point. The company needed liquidity. The bank wanted either stronger collateral or someone with financial strength to step in. Since I had done well for myself, she thought it was time for us to stop living like strangers. I asked whether Cole had called. She paused. "Well, he's ashamed." That almost made me laugh. The golden son who had worn confidence like perfume his whole life was finally embarrassed. Not when he was wasting money. Not when he was being praised for work other people did. Not when I was treated like background noise. He was ashamed now because the woman he had overlooked had become the person the bank might actually respect. I said I was sorry my father had been ill. I meant it. But then I asked the question that made the air shift between us. "Are you calling because you miss me or because you need my balance sheet?" Silence. Then my mother inhaled sharply and said, "You've become very cynical." No, I thought. I became accurate. She asked if I would come home for a meeting with the bank. I told her I'd think about it. That night, I opened old files on my laptop. Spreadsheets, emails, copies of cash projections I had built years earlier, notes from when I reorganized their systems, a scanned copy of the line of credit request they once wanted me to co-sign. I looked at those documents and felt something I hadn't expected. Not rage, clarity. Because success does that when you've earned it honestly. It doesn't just change your bank account, it changes your eyesight. A week later, I agreed to come. Not because I planned to save them, because I wanted to see whether power would make them honest. If you like this story, subscribe my channel for more beautiful stories. I drove into town on a gray Thursday morning that smelled like wet asphalt and old memories. Some places shrink when you leave them, not physically, emotionally. The streets looked smaller. The houses looked tired. The church where my mother once smiled through gossip looked less holy and more fluorescent. Even the Bennett supply sign looked diminished, sun-faded, slightly warped, clinging to a version of importance that time had already started peeling away. I checked into a hotel instead of staying with family. That detail mattered to my mother more than she wanted to admit. When I walked into the lobby for our first meeting, she looked at my overnight bag and said, "You couldn't just stay at home?" I looked at her calmly and said, "I am staying where I'm comfortable." That sentence landed between us like a closed door. My father looked older than his age. Illness had taken something from his posture, and for a second, I saw not the man who had underestimated me, but the fragile shape time eventually makes of all people. I felt sympathy, real sympathy. But sympathy is not the same as surrender. Cole arrived last, wearing a tailored jacket and the expression of a man hoping appearance could still negotiate reality. Ava came in 5 minutes later with a giant coffee and eyes red enough to suggest tears, though with Ava, that never meant much on its own. We sat in my parents' kitchen first because my mother said we should talk privately before the bank. Privately. Families love privacy when truth embarrasses them. She started with the script I expected: family, legacy, hard times, temporary support. My father said very little. Cole talked in circles about market conditions and supplier pressure. Ava added emotional static about how stressed everyone had been. Then my mother turned to me and used the tone that had manipulated me for years. "Nora, you've always been the capable one. We need that right now." I held her gaze and said, "Interesting. When I was saving this company for free, I was support staff." Nobody spoke. Cole looked down. My mother stiffened. Ava blinked quickly, like she hated any version of events where she wasn't the main injured party. "I was working hard too," Cole said finally. I nodded once. At being congratulated. That made him flush. My father cleared his throat and said, "We all made mistakes." It was the closest he had ever come to admitting how this family worked. But close is not the same as enough. At the bank that afternoon, I understood immediately why they had wanted me there in person. The branch manager, Mr. Talbot, recognized my name before he sat down. He had read about our company's funding round. He asked thoughtful questions. He treated me like a professional adult with authority, not a daughter assigned to emotional cleanup. My family noticed. You can tell when people are watching their hierarchy collapse in real time. It makes them quiet in a very specific way. Mr. Talbot laid out the facts carefully. Bennett Supply was over-leveraged. Cash reserves were weak. Personal guarantees were already stretched. The bank was willing to consider restructuring only if additional capital came in or a financially strong party attached their name to the solution. Then he turned to me and said, very respectfully, "If Ms. Bennett were interested in participating, it would materially change the conversation." There it was. Not love, not reconciliation, not family healing. Participation. My mother sat up straighter, almost smiling, like the room had finally remembered the part she'd written for me. I folded my hands and asked for a moment to review the current numbers. Cole slid the folder toward me. He was nervous. I could tell by the way he avoided eye contact. The projections were messy, optimistic in all the wrong places, and built on assumptions no serious operator would trust. Vendor obligations had been kicked down the road. Personal withdrawals blurred the line between family life and business spending. Ava's boutique had received repeated temporary transfers. My father had guaranteed too much. Cole had signed too much. Everyone had been living inside denial, and now the math had come to collect. I looked up slowly. Who prepared these forecasts? Cole said, "I did, with input." Input. That word almost made me smile. I asked 3 questions. He couldn't answer 2 of them. My father tried to jump in and only made it worse. Mr. Talbot remained polite, but I could see the professional conclusion forming behind his eyes. Then my mother spoke. "Nora can help straighten this out. She's always been good with these things." Always been good with these things. I thought about being 18 in the hallway while they moved my college fund into Cole's dream. I thought about unpaid weekends, about being called support staff, about being told not to expect family if I didn't make myself useful on command. And suddenly, I felt no confusion at all. I closed the folder. "I'm not attaching my finances to this business," I said. The silence was immediate and complete. My mother stared at me as if I had spoken in another language. Cole's jaw tightened. Ava looked offended on behalf of a universe she believed was unfairly failing her. My father rubbed a hand over his face and stared at the table. Mr. Talbot, to his credit, didn't flinch. He simply nodded once, professionally, and asked whether I might be interested in another kind of conversation if the company moved into asset sale territory. That was when my mother finally lost the mask. "Nora," she snapped, "this is your family." I turned to her slowly. "No," I said. "This is a business you let my brother play with while I did invisible labor. This is debt you all treated like somebody else's future would cover it. This is not family. Family would have required honesty years ago." Her face changed. Ava started crying quietly. Cole leaned back in his chair and said, "So this is revenge?" I looked at him and said, "No. Revenge would have been letting you fail earlier." Mr. Talbot coughed softly into his hand, the closest thing to emotion he allowed himself. We left the bank without a deal. Outside in the parking lot, my mother finally said what she had been carrying under her tongue the whole time. "After everything we've done for you." It's amazing how often people reach for that sentence when they have no clean account of what they've actually given. I looked at her and asked, "What exactly did you do for me?" She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "We raised you." I nodded, and I spent years earning the right not to be used by the people who were supposed to protect me. My father spoke then, his voice low and tired. "She's right." We all turned toward him. Maybe illness had softened something pride couldn't. Maybe losing control had. Maybe he was simply too exhausted to keep defending the family myth. Whatever the reason, it was the first honest sentence he had spoken in my direction in years. Cole muttered, "Dad." But my father kept going. "We should have listened to you. A long time ago." Those words should have healed something in me. They didn't. Because timing matters. Truth spoken only after collapse does not undo what silence built. Still, I respected it more than anything else said that day. I went back to my hotel and expected to feel shattered. Instead, I felt calm. That surprised me, but only until I understood why. The daughter who used to beg internally for fairness had finally disappeared. In her place stood a woman who knew that other people's late understanding did not create an obligation inside her. The next morning, Mr. Talbot called. He said the company would likely move toward controlled liquidation unless an immediate private solution appeared. Then he mentioned one particular property, the old warehouse behind the main showroom. It had decent bones, a good loading setup, and standalone potential if separated from the rest of the failing operation. He asked whether my company, or I personally, might want to discuss acquisition if it became available. I thought about it for less than a minute, not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted transformation. That warehouse was where I used to sit on stacked invoices as a teenager, balancing numbers no one thanked me for. It was where I learned the language of operations, while everyone around me praised louder, less capable people. It was the place where my usefulness had been exploited and my value denied. And suddenly, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. 3 months later, after the legal process unfolded and the family business was broken apart piece by piece, I bought the warehouse through an investment entity connected to my work in Chicago. Not the whole company, not the Bennett name, just the part with real potential. Then I turned it into something my family would never have imagined. I renovated the space into a training and resource center for women starting practical small businesses, contracting firms, logistics services, local supply operations, bookkeeping practices, skilled trade support companies. Real work, real tools, real sustainability. Not performance, not family mythology, not image inflated by favoritism. I named the scholarship and mentorship program inside it the Second Ledger Initiative, because every invisible daughter deserves a place where her work is counted properly the first time. People in town talked, of course. Some said it was poetic. Some said it was cold. Some said I had bought the bones of my father's pride and repurposed them into a monument to myself. They were wrong. It wasn't a monument to me. It was a correction, a living correction, a place built from the exact lesson my family refused to learn until it cost them everything. If you keep treating the capable child like she exists only to save others, one day she will learn to save herself, and she will stop asking permission. Cole never forgave me, which would have mattered more if his forgiveness had ever been attached to respect. Ava posted a vague quote online about betrayal and narcissism, then deleted it when nobody rallied the way she expected. My mother called twice after the sale and once after the center opened. I let all 3 calls go to voicemail. Her final message was the most honest thing she'd said in years. I don't understand how things ended up like this. I listened to it once and then deleted it, because I did understand. They ended up like this one small choice at a time. Every time my father praised confidence over competence. Every time my mother mistook sacrifice for love, as long as I was the one paying it. Every time Cole was protected from consequences. Every time Ava's feelings outranked reality. Every time my work was useful enough to exploit and too quiet to celebrate. That's how things end up like this, not through one tragedy, through repeated permission. A year after the center opened, it had already helped dozens of women launch or stabilize their businesses. Some needed help with pricing, some with inventory planning, some with licensing, budgeting, or basic financial systems. I visited once a month when I could. The first time I stood in that renovated warehouse and watched a room full of women taking notes, asking sharp questions, building futures with both ambition and structure, I had to step outside for a moment because I felt tears rising too fast. Not sad tears, the other kind. The kind that come when something broken inside your history finally gets used to build something better. Daniel proposed that winter on a quiet Sunday morning while coffee was brewing and snow was collecting on the balcony rail. No drama, no audience, no performance. Just a ring, a trembling smile, and a question asked with love instead of spectacle. I said yes. When we got married the following fall, it was small and deliberate and completely ours. No one from my family attended. That was my decision, not theirs. Some people heard that and called it harsh, but boundaries only sound harsh to people who benefited from your lack of them. What I felt that day wasn't bitterness, it was relief. Relief that my joy no longer depended on being seen by people committed to misunderstanding me. Relief that the life I was building didn't need to be legible to those who only valued what they could control. Relief that love, real love, had finally entered my life without demanding I become smaller to keep it. A week after the wedding, I got a short letter from my father. Not a text, not a voicemail, a real letter. His handwriting looked shakier than I remembered. He wrote that he had been thinking a lot about what men pass down without meaning to. Pride, silence, blind spots. He wrote that he had spent too many years mistaking loudness for leadership and dependence for closeness. He said he should have told me long ago that I was the most capable person in the room, more times than he ever admitted. He said losing the business had hurt, but not as much as realizing he had taught his children the wrong lessons about worth. At the very end, he wrote one sentence I still keep folded inside my desk. You were never the extra child. You were the one holding the roof up while we pretended the walls were strong. I cried when I read that, not because it fixed everything, because it named the truth. And sometimes being named accurately after years of distortion feels like a form of mercy, even when it arrives late. I wrote back, carefully, kindly, with distance. I told him I appreciated the honesty. I told him I hoped recovery had made life slower in ways that taught him something gentler than success ever had. I did not promise a reunion. I did not offer money. I did not reopen doors just because remorse finally knocked. Growth is not proven by how quickly you return to the rooms that wounded you. Sometimes growth is proven by how peacefully you can leave them closed. If you ask me now whether becoming more successful than all of them felt good, I'll tell you the truth. Not at first. At first, it felt strange, heavy, almost sad, because a part of me had once believed that if I ever became impressive enough, my family would finally love me properly. And when success came, it didn't produce that miracle. It just revealed what had already been true. The problem had never been my value. It had been their vision. That is a hard thing to grieve, but once I grieved it, something beautiful happened. I stopped trying to win love from people who only knew how to assign roles. I stopped mistaking usefulness for belonging. I stopped believing that being chosen last meant I was worth less. And in the empty space left behind by all that false effort, my real life had room to grow. So no, the sweetest part was never that I became richer, more respected, or more successful than the people who once looked past me. The sweetest part was this: I became someone they could no longer define. And if you've ever been the overlooked child, the reliable one, the strong one, the one who got praised only when you were convenient and blamed the second you had boundaries, then I need you to hear me clearly. Your value does not begin when other people finally recognize it. Your future is not a debt your family gets to collect. And success is not selfish just because it no longer includes the people who benefited from your silence. Sometimes the most powerful lesson you can teach the people who treated you like nobody is becoming somebody they can no longer use. If you like this story, subscribe my channel for more beautiful stories.